So without the redemption of the blood, there is no remission of sin. There is no ability of redemption, and there is no other way to come to me. So this morning I meditated on the fact that Noah's sons must have been born before Enoch was taken to heaven, and they received first-hand knowledge of the wisdom and writings that were given to him by God. And those wisdoms included a plea at the very beginning, a plea from the fallen angels. They were begging and asking Enoch to intercede for them, to go before the All-Father, the highest Father of all, Creator, and plead for their forgiveness, for choosing to come to the earth and take the women as their bride, and creating the Nephilim that destroyed all of the creation. They were eating all the animals, and then they were eating all the men, and then they were eating all themselves, and it was just a mess. And they were eating the blood, and so which is huge. You don't eat the life which is in the blood. And when God discovered this, that these creatures had gone to this man and asked for him to intercede, he was very angry. And he said, you should be interceding for man, not the other way around. So he showed me this morning that there was no way for these angels, because they're eternal beings. There was no way for them to be redeemed the way we can be by the blood of the Lamb. So they are eternally to be separated from God, eternally to be punished, to be moved into a place where they have no purpose. And he showed me this morning, that's part of this whole thing, is having a purpose, having a glory. I don't want to get into that yet. So then Enoch tells Methuselah and his whole family, which must have included Noah, and perhaps the sons were born. I'm going to go back and study that. And so then the flood comes, which was predicted by Enoch. He knew this was coming. And so Noah was supernaturally born. He was special when he was born, and set apart for the redemption of the world, made holy. And he then, after the flood occurred, those 4 boys went to the 4 corners of the earth, but only one carried on the same lessons and teachings that were given to us by Enoch and Methuselah. And that was, I don't know which of the boys. I don't. The one that stayed in Ur, whose Abraham's descendant line came from. So those people that stayed in the southern peninsula and right there near Israel, in that whole area, they are the ones that believed that God was himself. And in the meantime, those fallen demons and angels, those fallen angels who became like demons, had supernatural power here on earth, and they were showing themselves and teaching things to man. They did that before the flood, and they weren't creating more giants, maybe, because there are giants in Moses' day, so they might have still been. I don't know how that worked. Maybe the genetic lines continued, but or maybe they lived a long time. But anyway, so only 1/4 of the population was monotheistic. And then Abraham came. We know the story from there very well. But still there was no redemption for sin until God gave Moses the law and the sacrifice, which goes back to the Garden of Eden. And one of the thoughts I had on the Garden of Eden was that we had the original sin between Satan and Eve. But since then, there was a lot of other sin multiplied between the fallen angels and man and woman. Woman was deceived to create the Nephilim and the Achim, and man was deceived by learning the skills of writing and iron working and metallurgy and engineering. These are wisdom, these are wise things that the fallen angels were sharing with man, thinking that they were helping them, making them worship them. And they did worship them. They thanked them by worshiping them. But what man was deceived in that, thinking that any of it came from them. And that's how all these little gods happen. It's how they happened in Egypt. It's how they happened in the Viking area. It's how they happened in India. It's how, I don't know what happened in China. I don't know if they have any gods at all. It's something else I'm going to look into. Because how did they go without anything? Because they're such spiritual people. So, anyway. So Abraham then carried it forth, and Moses, it was so rampant that God said, okay, let me give you the law of redemption, of all the different sacrifices that can happen so that I can be in your presence, so you can be cleaned up. And of course, they weren't able to do it. It was too much for them. They weren't capable of keeping up the redemption because they're just human. And we weren't given a lot of ability. You know, the angels and the other entities had supernatural ability. Maybe the first humans did, but we certainly didn't as it went down. So he had to give a son, the perfect lamb, who knew from beginning of time that only his sacrifice could do to cover everything. So he covered it all with his beautiful sacrifice, and all of mankind is redeemed by that sacrifice, that one sacrifice, once and done and for all on the cross. And because my soul lives on this side of the cross, I'm able to see these things more clearly because they've come to pass. They're historically accurate, like a reflection. But before that, the waves were still happening and you couldn't see the reflection. Before Jesus, there was no Redeemer. There was a desire for one. There was a need for one. There was a cry for one, but there was no Redeemer. There was no way. So it's interesting, and I thank God for that insight. So he was telling me about purpose today. In addition to all this, he said that our purpose is to live for his glory and then to die. And in our death, we're able to create an orchard. That is our goal. An orchard of love that has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of seeds. And so that's what I want for my life. And because the angels, fallen angels, could never die, they could never create that. They didn't follow their God-given purpose. Therefore, they committed ultimate sin. That's what sin is not following your God-given purpose. And there was no way they could be redeemed because they are eternal. And there was no blood, there was no stand-in, there was no bloodshed that could happen for them. They thought that perhaps man's blood or man's plea or man's cry could do it for them. But Enoch was willing, but God said no. It's not powerful enough to cover this sin. Isn't that interesting? So my glory, my personal glory, is in my words, my actions, the love I give, the kindness I give, the lessons and teaching and care I gave to Natalie, so that she will in turn give that to my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and on. The love that was created there, the security, the knowledge and wisdom of God. It's the greatest of all glories that you can give, is teaching your children about God. It's beautiful. So that was the meditation in my heart this morning.